The Oracl3 Network.
We have an active shooter. We have an active shooter inside the fairgrounds.
Welcome to Active Shooter, a podcast that covers the whys, the hows, and the aftermath of active shooter and mass casualty events.
They have an active shooter in the building. A second call says they are being attacked.
I've been shot. 1692 means we got shots fired. 4:15 ASF. Route 91 sounded like an automatic firearm.
Active shooter. Reports of an active shooter. Active shooter.
Active shooter mass casualty incidents.
Thank you for listening.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
Today's shooting in the town of Jonesboro shocks us not only because of its victims — 4 little girls are dead tonight, along with one of their teachers — but because the suspects in the case are children. 2 young boys, aged 11 and 13, are being held tonight for opening fire on their teachers and classmates at Westside Middle School. In addition to the dead, another teacher is in critical condition and other children are wounded. And another town is left holding its children and asking the awful, unreal question, how could this happen here?
Each of the shooting or mass casualty events we have covered on the Active Shooter podcast are unique in their own way. Today's story is no different, but there is one stark difference between today's case and others. On March 25th, 1998, the Westside Middle School shooting perpetrators were identified, arrested, charged, prosecuted, served their sentence, and are free, having repaid their debt to society. At least in the eyes of the judicial system. The unfortunate truth is that that type of debt cannot be repaid. The loss of life cannot be made whole again. The pain and suffering from gunshot wounds cannot be compensated. The severe mental and emotional anguish most certainly cannot be repaid. Yet, here we stand, with the repercussions of that petrifying day continuing to reverberate through the lives of each and every individual that was touched by this shooting. Today's case is especially poignant because of the victims of this tragic event. Young, school-aged children and their families must go on to grieve all they have lost. It is especially tragic because the shooters, one still living and the other deceased, served their sentence, yet it was a brief one due to their young ages. We will examine this case from all angles, including how 2 middle school-aged boys managed to arm themselves with an arsenal of weapons, sneak inside of the school to pull the fire alarm, and lay in wait, hiding in the bushes to shoot off their classmates as fast as they could reload their guns.
Active Shooter the podcast is a High Five Holly production, and I'm your host, JT. If you've listened to our prior episodes, you know that the Active Shooter podcast team has taken the No Notoriety pledge, and we will not be sharing the real name of the shooters that we cover. We will be giving the shooters a pseudonym and refer to them by that name throughout the episode. This will help in clearing up any confusion in the story, while remaining true to our pledge and not naming the shooter by their actual name. We will refer to today's shooter as Ben and Chad.
Fifth period was just beginning at Westside Middle School when students suddenly heard the fire alarm going off. Believing it to be merely a typical drill, students thought nothing of it. However, teachers were concerned. You see, teachers were usually given advance notice when a fire drill was going to take place. Yet, school had just resumed from spring break, so perhaps some teachers simply thought they forgot about the drill. After all, it didn't seem like there was a fire.
And I remember at first thinking it must be a real fire. Because, we're usually told about fire drills. We know in advance that we're going to have them.
There was no smoke or any other signs. Still, teachers ordered their students to file into line as they ushered everyone outside in an orderly fashion. As students and faculty made their way outside, it immediately became apparent that this was not a fire drill. No, the school was not ablaze. The school was under siege. The moment teachers and kids alike stepped outdoors, shots began flying. Unsure exactly what was happening, it was thought by many that the noise came from a construction company that was working on a nearby building.
911, where's your emergency?
This has been a shot at Westside Middle School.
911, where's your emergency?
This is Westside Middle School. We have several children down. We need more than one ambulance.
Ma'am, we've got all the
We need
ambulance.
police, too.
We've got all the
We've got
ambulance.
shots fired.
Okay, they're still being fired. Where are they coming
I
from?
don't know. They look like they're coming from the woods.
The shooters, mini snipers, had created a sort of hunting blind in the wooded area adjacent to the school's property. The boys knew just where students and teachers would be exiting the building, believing the fire alarm they pulled was a fire drill. The boys were nearly giddy in their excitement to act as snipers, picking off innocent classmates one by one, without a single care that they were exterminating human lives, like they were playing a real, live video game. The horrific reality quickly dawned on the kids and teachers. Someone was shooting at them. This wasn't a fire drill. This wasn't even a fire. They were being attacked, and no one even knew where the shots were coming from.
I started hearing what I thought was firecrackers. I looked, and there were different children, just in different shapes, going down.
All that mattered now was taking cover, anywhere possible. Several children and adults attempted to run back into the school, but the doors were locked whenever a fire alarm was triggered because of a security feature. There was no option other than to hide or flee to another area of the school, by the gymnasium, where the doors could be opened. There were a total of 9 teachers and 87 students trying to evacuate the school at once. The scene turned into utter chaos, and no one was quite certain just what was going on.
I remember hearing noises that sounded kind of like firecrackers, but it also sounded like noises that we had heard before because of the construction of the school. It kind of sounded like, if you drop a plywood board or like a 2x4 on top of another 2x4. That's in my mind. I remember thinking, well, that's what that is. And then it wasn't until then, you heard screams and then you see people running. And I don't ever really recall looking out and seeing it just looked like a blur. Like it just looked like chaos. Like everyone was just running. And it was like, well, this is a fire, this is a fire alarm. Why are we running? And then, I was walking out, and when you walk out kind of under the awning, the trash can to the left of us, and it was myself and a friend, and then, another friend, a 7th grader who actually got shot. She must have been a step out of the awning more so than we were. When we saw her fall, that's when we realized this is something else.
As the school children and teachers ran for their lives, Ben and Chad took off running too. They had a getaway car ready and didn't waste much more time on the shooting, knowing that police were probably already on the way. The van the boys stole from Chad's family sat waiting about a half-mile away, packed with snacks, camping gear, and extra clothing. The kids were ready for life on the run. Or so they thought. The boys didn't know that the nearby construction workers had noticed them racing away from the school and immediately contacted the authorities to report what they saw. It must have been quite startling to hear a fire alarm followed by gunshots, and then seeing 2 middle school-aged boys running from the woods, armed with weapons they presumably just used. Ben and Chad were caught only 10 minutes after the shooting first started, because of this immediate action.
We're expecting 2 adults to be in the woods running, and when I cross the ridge and they're running north, it's 2 little boys dressed in camouflage.
Once the boys were apprehended, they refused to say anything, making no statement to police. Not a word. The boys followed the police's instructions as they were told. Neither boy would experience freedom again. Not for many years. The Craighead Sheriff's Office handled the investigation into the shooting at the Westside Middle School. They obviously knew who did the shooting. Yet what the police never would figure out was why exactly these 2 young boys decided to steal weapons and an automobile from family, and then go on a deadly rampage. All these years later, and we still do not know the answer.
Everybody that is asked about this wants to know why. I mean, people try to develop theories. Well, somebody was mad at a girlfriend at school, or somebody was unhappy with their home life. But I'm going to tell you that I cannot, to this day, find one reason that you could put your finger on and say, this is why it happened.
Between them, Ben and Chad fired about 22 rounds in only 4 minutes, killing 4 students and 1 teacher. Another 9 students and 1 teacher were shot, sustaining varying degrees of injury. 5 people lost their life that day. 1 teacher and 4 students started a typical school day, but would never go back home. 5 different families saw their loved ones off, probably wishing them a good day, never knowing it would be the last time they would exchange such pleasantries.
I just couldn't believe how many weapons they had, and in every pocket you stuck your hand in, there was shells, bullets, a gun, or a knife.
Social studies teacher Lynette Thetford was injured in the attack. Lynette was struck in her lower abdomen. The bullet went right through, damaging the nerves that controlled her legs. She laid on the ground paralyzed, unable to run for help. Astonishingly, though, she survived, though she had to learn to walk again. It was a terrible injury, but at least she had her life.
The force of the bullet kind of spun me around, and I hit the ground, and I saw there was a little girl that was there and laying on the sidewalk, and her back was completely covered in blood. And that's the point when I realized that it was very serious, that there were people dying.
11-year-old Candace Porter and 12-year-old Jennifer Jacobs were both also injured in the shooting. Oddly enough, Candace recently dated, as much as an 11-year-old can date, Ben, and Jennifer dated Chad. After the investigation was complete, it was proven to be a sheer coincidence that the 2 girls were shot after having broken the 2 shooters' hearts. Shannon Wright was born on August 26, 1965 in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Shannon died a hero, leaping in front of a 12-year-old student, Emma Pittman. Shannon saved Emma, but she sacrificed herself to do so. As Shannon jumped into the line of fire, she took a fatal gunshot to the chest and abdomen, bullets that were meant for Emma Pittman. Shannon didn't die immediately. Once the gunfire ceased, paramedics were able to get to Shannon and take her to the hospital. Unfortunately, she succumbed to her injuries hours later at St. Bernard's Regional Medical Center. She was only 32 years old. Shannon had a beautiful 2-year-old son named Zane and a husband named Mitchell, whom she left behind. She attended Jonesboro area schools and graduated from the Arkansas State University. While in high school, Shannon was a popular teenager who was also a cheerleader. She met her husband while attending Arkansas State, and he later became a sales representative. Shannon started teaching at Westside Middle School in 1991. Since she was a little girl, she had always wanted to be a teacher, and that dream brought her to Westside. She was an English teacher, and genuinely passionate about her work. When she was a small girl, Shannon used to make her little brothers play school with her, and she would give him homework, and created lesson plans to follow. The week before the shooting, Shannon, her husband Mitchell, and son Zane went to Disney World for a family vacation, while school was on spring break. Natalie Brooks was born on May 26, 1986. She was just 11 years old when she lost her life. Natalie was a sweet child